Hello and welcome back to WhitTips. Today we're looking at William Shakespeare's play The Tragedy of Macbeth. This is part 3 on a little theme around the supernatural, the unnatural and the natural within the play. And today is entitled Dark Times, exploring Shakespeare's use of light and dark within the play. I suppose one word that comes to mind when you think of Macbeth is darkness. We see a lot of modern film adaptations and interpretations of the play where a lot of it is shot at night. Back in Jacobean Britain, obviously it would have been performed during the day at the Globe Theatre, otherwise no one would have been able to see it very well at night. So that darkness that's come through over hundreds and hundreds of years has come through mainly from Shakespeare's use of imagery and his language as well, and that's what we're going to be looking at today, how Shakespeare creates this very dark, gothic, nightly, kind of terrifying tone sometimes throughout the play, all through his use of language and imagery. Some key vocabulary for us here then before we get going. Words that we've looked at with Jekyll and Hyde in the past, 3 good terms to use when discussing characters or themes within literature. And here we've got contrast, juxtaposition and antithesis. A contrast is just something that's very different from something else. A juxtaposition is when these two contrasting objects are placed together by a writer within a text, within a sentence, within a line, doesn't really matter, with a particular effect to show some kind of difference between the two objects, characters, themes, whatever it might be that they're trying to draw attention to. And then we've also got another word for contrast in many ways, antithesis. That's the direct opposite of something else. So these are words again that you should be using throughout your literature text, not just for Jekyll and Hyde. They carry over from Macbeth as well. So when you're writing about Macbeth, do make sure that you're using these as with any of your literature texts. To go with your key vocabulary today, we've got some key imagery as well. These are some buzzwords that you could be looking for throughout the play as you're rereading it or just listening throughout today. Words that show us some kind of differences. Now if you look at this list here, what we've got is down the left hand side we've got light, sun, day, white, awake. These are all linked together and they juxtapose, if you will, they contrast the ones on the right with dark, moon, night, black, asleep. Why these two lists are important to us is that the ones on the left, the light down to awake, they're all synonymous with the good, and the ones on the right are all synonymous with evil. Okay, so when we're looking at these words of darkness and moon and black, then there is a sense of evilness brewing with them. We need to think about which characters are using them and in what context within the play, just like we do perhaps with the characters that are used or associated with the words on the left. So listen out and look out for these pieces of key imagery as we go through it today. So the first quotation we're going to look at is a very famous one. It's from Macbeth. It's Act 1, Scene 4. So it's after the witches, before we've met Lady Macbeth, which is important because again we get to see a little bit more of Macbeth's mindset before he's been emasculated and manipulated by his wife. Macbeth turns away from the other characters on stage, having just been made Thane of Cawdor. Note the stage direction here, the aside. So the other characters are on stage, but he turns away from them. He looks at the audience and he reveals a little bit more of what he's thinking and his mindset when he says, "Stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires." He is already, these black desires, he's already thinking about the next steps that he needs for that ultimate power, and that ultimate power is to become king. So he's already thinking about killing King Duncan here before Lady Macbeth even started with that, but he's savvy enough to think he just can't do this in broad daylight, therefore he needs darkness. Darkness is going to become, for Macbeth, his friend. The blackness, the darkness, the night, they are safe spaces, if you will. Macbeth believes that they're almost on his side, and if he's almost safer to do these things at night when nobody can see him, because obviously he's got more chance of getting away with them. So the very next scene, we get to hear Lady Macbeth's and I've thoughts here, and I've entitled these Lady Macbeth's Darker Thoughts. Over the years, Lady Macbeth has got far worse press, if you will, and is interpreted as a much darker, much more evil character than Macbeth, especially at the beginning of the play. But you see both of them referencing here night. Lady Macbeth chooses a different pre-modifying adjective. She desires thick night, real darkness, if you will, to hide what they're going to do. And she's far more explicit in her language as well. She talks about the keen knife. So here, perhaps the thick night to hide the more explicitness. Her plan is far more advanced than Macbeth. Macbeth's got the thoughts. Lady Macbeth has got thoughts and a plan of how to go about this. And she says here, "Not heaven peep through the blanket of the dark to cry, hold, hold." Both characters conscious here that with daytime and with being caught, this would be a sin. They're kind of deluded, if you will, to think that they could get away with this through the eyes of God. But they seem to be both hinting at here, if they do it at night, then there is a chance that they might get away with it, both within the conscious realm of reality and in a theological realm as well, where they might be able to avoid what Lady Macbeth calls here the dunnest smoke of hell. They might be able to avoid eternal damnation, but we know from the title, The Tragedy of Macbeth, that's not going to happen. Also, the plan here, Lady Macbeth says a little bit later in the speech, "You shall put this night's great business into my dispatch." So she's not talking to Macbeth here yet. He's not arrived, but she's already talking in euphemisms with great business. But she's got the plan. This is going to happen at night, and it's going to happen hopefully quite soon for them to be able to grab this power. That's what they want. They're going to use darkness. They're going to use the supernatural as well to gain any advantage that they can to get power, to cling on to power, because that again replaces some kind of lack. We've got to come back to that. Why do they embroil in this supernatural, the theme of the supernatural and elements of the supernatural? Why do they do these horrible dark things? It's because Macbeth and Lady Macbeth lack something. And again, we have to interpret what that is, and that's up to you to interpret what that is, and to do a little bit more research and try and find out what you think it is that is lacking within the relationship of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. The next scene, then we move into Act 2, and we've got the scene just before Duncan's death, and Macbeth murders King Duncan. Act 2, Scene 1, we've got Banquo kind of standing guard at Macbeth's castle. The king is there, he's a very important person, he needs lots of bodyguards. He's got two of his bravest soldiers that have just been heroically valiant in battle, Macbeth and Banquo, and they're standing guard, but Banquo is standing guard outside in Macbeth's court. Now it's very dark at this point, so dark that they need a torch. It says enter Banquo here again, look at stage direction. Enter Banquo and Fleance bearing a torch. And there's a little exchange here. But again, it's this element of darkness. Just before this happens, there is darkness where people cannot even recognise the people. Nice little quotations here. The moon is down, I have not heard the clock. It's this idea that what they're going to do on this night, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, is going to alter time as we know it. It's going to alter the time that we're in now. It's going to change the monarch, if you will, and it's going to alter the outcome for all of time as well. So Shakespeare really does play with time in this play, Macbeth as well, Macbeth's actions. You know, if this had happened, and don't forget contextually what had just happened, the gunpowder plot. We're talking a matter of time. If Guy Fawkes had not have been found sat waiting to light the powder, then it could have been a very different course of history. Okay, there's times as we know it and as we live in can vary very much by accident, by consequence, by chance. And this is an important quotation, I think, from Fleance here. The moon is down, I have not heard the clock. This idea, and I do like this, that Macbeth's are going to alter time here. Banquo replies with this: hold, take my sword, there's husbandry in heaven, their candles are out. Take thee that too, a heavy summons lies like lead upon me, and yet I would not sleep, merciful powers restrain me in the cursed thoughts that nature gives way to reprose. Enter Macbeth and a servant with a torch. Who's there? It's that dark at this point that Banquo can't even recognise his best friend Macbeth coming through. But Banquo, just before Macbeth comes on there, talking about husbandry in heaven. Husbandry is like cultivating, it's like gardening almost. If you were working the land, husbandry. There's husbandry in heaven. And he's talking about the stars here. It's a nice metaphor that there is some kind of work going on in the sky with stars coming on and off. And that's all about the chance again. Macbeth is waiting for his chance, he's waiting for darkness, and it's almost like in the sky, the lights, the stars are switching themselves off one by one, and it's getting darker and darker and darker, and when the night gets to its darkest point, that's when Lady Macbeth will strike, and that's where times will change for the worse for this fictional Scotland within the play. And that chance comes. We don't see it on stage, but it happens. Macbeth, after mulling it over with his imaginary dagger, goes through with it and he kills King Duncan. The deed is done. The next scene we're going to look at is Act 2, Scene 2. And here we talked about sleep. Very important here. There is 34, I think, references to sleep within the play Macbeth. And I think 8 of them happen in this little exchange here. And again, famous quotations. Macbeth, through the killing of Duncan, believes that he has murdered sleep. He is no longer, he looks at this, and you look at all the different variants of sleep here. The innocent can sleep, but that's not Macbeth, that's not Lady Macbeth. The knight's great business that they've committed now, this murder and regicide of King Duncan, means that they will never be able to rest. Macbeth shall sleep no more. The last quotation on here. They will be forever eternally damned. They will never be able to rest anymore. The death of each day's life, each day that they're going to live for the rest of their lives. Now they're going to be looking over their shoulder and they're going to be waiting for that judgment, whether in this, like we've talked about, real terms, or whether it's going to be in theological terms, and it's going to be the judgment by God at the end of the fictional lives. There's going to be judgment. There's going to be a consequence for the action that they've done, and again, sinful action that they have done. So this idea of not being able to rest, that is punishment. Not being able to sleep, not being able to switch off, not being able to relax, that's the punishment that they get. And that's Shakespeare's warning. That's very important. You know, you can do bad things, but there's going to be a consequence to it, and you're not going to get away with it. And especially if you do something as bad as try to commit an act of treason or go further in an act of regicide, there's going to be a severe punishment, torture for you in this life and in any other realms that a Jacobean man believes that he may go to. Just after that scene then, Act 2, Scene 3, we have Lennox enter. The Macbeths have gone to bed. My favourite scene of the play begins with the porter drunkenly opening the door and making some quite deep points about morality, life in general, and contextually about the times there as well. But we have Lennox, that enters to come and wake up King Duncan and to take him to wherever it is that he needs to be next. And a little exchange between Lennox and Macbeth as Macduff goes and find King Duncan's dead body. Lennox is talking about the night before, the night of the murder, unaware of what has happened. He says that the night has been unruly. Some of this description now is unnatural and some of it is supernatural. They talk about chimneys being blown down, so it's a very wild night in terms of weather. We can link that into pathetic fallacy as well. It's been a wild night for the Macbeths as well. But it goes further than that, and it goes, as you see these orange bits here, there were strange lamentings, and in the air across all of Scotland there seemed to be almost strange screams of death. Now that is the supernatural. Is that the witches? Is that just the sound of the wind? Okay, that's up for us to interpret. But there is something about this night He calls it a woeful time, and some say the earth was feverous and it did shake. The earth was sick. It's this absolute state of chaos that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth have brought upon Jacobi in Scotland with the murder and the regicide of King Duncan. They have disrupted the natural order. They have broken the great chain of being, and it's not just within their lives that there is chaos and darkness. That is now going to go across all of Scotland as good King Duncan and his golden office is juxtaposed with Macbeth, this evil tyrant with his black desires. So Macbeth retorts here with talking to Lennox with "'Twas a rough night." There is a sense of irony, hypocrisy here as well. It was more than a rough night. This was a sinful, murderous, damning night. Macbeth full well knows it, but he does, like he's been instructed by Lady Macbeth, he manages to act like the innocent flower here. He keeps a straight face, and he avoids any sort of initial detection in the crime that he has committed. Act 2, Scene 4 then is a window scene. These scenes are often used by Shakespeare to show the audience the reaction within the play, within the times, to the events that's happened. So there's no main characters in here. There's no Macbeth, there's no Lady Macbeth. We've got Ross talking to an old man. Ross throughout the play, very good, very loyal character, loyal to Duncan, loyal to Macbeth up until the point where he can't be loyal to Macbeth anymore. And old men, often used by Shakespeare to symbolise the wise. With age came wisdom in Jacobi and Britain. And they're talking about Ross, especially. You can see in this emboldened bit here, is talking about the dark night strangles the travelling lamp. It's night predominant, or the day's shame, that darkness does the face of earth entomb, when living light should kiss it. We've just been talking about Macbeth's actions, and he's plunged Scotland into chaos. He's not just plunged Scotland into chaos politically, and in terms of becoming a violently unstable country, he's also affected what seems to be something that should be a given, that there is day and night. Now there is hardly any day. Perhaps this isn't winter time, because this is quite strange. So this scene might happen maybe a couple of days after the killing of Duncan, might happen maybe a couple of weeks after, as Macbeth is about to become king. But what we've got here is that the dark night, I've got to think about the violent imagery here. The dark night is strangling. When we strangle something, we restrict it, we stop it. The night now is stopping, and the night and the evilness is stopping. Don't forget that imagery. Stopping the travelling lamp, metaphor for the sun here, stopping the sun from moving across the sky. So this again, this idea of time, go right back to Fleance's quote, and we think about the time and the quote about the husbandry in heaven, and the fact that stars could be switched off, and now that the sun, the most powerful thing in the solar system, can be stopped. That's the consequence of Macbeth's actions. That's how far-reaching they are. And if you carry on and have a look through this scene, you can see more dark things are happening here. We talk about a falcon towering in a pride of place was by a mousing owl hawked at and killed. So we get owls killing falcons. Duncan's horses start to eat each other. So Macbeth's actions here and the killing of King Duncan are far felt within the Scottish society, and it's brought very much unnatural or supernatural things, which would obviously cause fear and panic and worry and anxiety across the nation. And Macbeth, he just seems to kind of breed on that. It's that fear that he seems to think makes him a good leader, that people fear him, when we know that good leaders earn that, like Duncan, through golden offices. So we've got that further juxtaposition between good golden Duncan, black evil Macbeth. The next one's quite a jump. We're in Act 3, Scene 2, and I like this quotation. I always call it Macbeth's pivot point. And the quotation starts with, "Be innocent of the knowledge, dearest Chuck." Here, Macbeth is talking to Lady Macbeth. Up until this point, they have worked as kind of a team. Lady Macbeth has taken the lead, perhaps, but they have worked as a team. At this point, there is a change in Macbeth's character. He stops involving Lady Macbeth. And he starts to take matters into his own hands. There is a massive sense of irony and hypocrisy again here, with the fact that Lady Macbeth could be innocent of anything. She is implicit in the worst possible Jacobean crime, an act of regicide, killing of the king. So there is no way she could be innocent in this life or the next life, the afterlife. After this, so this is patronising language from Macbeth. It's like I say, full of irony. But Macbeth here again is talking about This is the idea of Banquo being murdered now. So he says, "Come, sealing night, scarf up the tender eye of pitiful day. Scarf up, night, scarf up the tender eye. Cover it, just like the blanket was going to cover it from Lady Macbeth." They need, and again they believe, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth believe, that the darkness and nighttime, they're on their side. It's their advantage. They exploit that and their evilness to get away with their crimes. And it's working up until this point for them. They are getting what they want, and they are about to get what they deserve as well. So here the day for Macbeth is a pitiful day, and the light is thickening, and the crow makes wing to the rocky wood, and here Macbeth is about to employ night's black agents. Who are they? Are they the witches? Are they the murderers that he's about to set on his best friend Banquo? Don't forget, relation to actual King James. So this is another shocking point in the play, but it's not bad enough that Macbeth has killed his king, someone he's supposed to be loyal to. He's now about to go, perhaps morally, one step worse. Perhaps not legally, but morally, he's going to kill his best friend. This is his best friend. So it just shows us the lengths that Macbeth is willing to go to keep hold of his power, and how dark his character is. Or another interpretation of this, just how far into perhaps psychosis or some psychotic state Macbeth has fallen, and how deluded he has become from the killing of King Duncan and from that imaginary dagger to this point now where he thinks it's an absolutely reasonable and logic thing to do to kill his best friend, and the fact that he can talk to his wife, perhaps the conductor of the last murder, and call her innocent, and requires her to be innocent of the knowledge. So this is Macbeth here now changing, but still, even though working within the parameters of nighttime and darkness, to be able to get his dirty deeds done. And if "Be innocent of the knowledge, dearest Chuck" was Macbeth's pivot point, there is perhaps another pivot point coming up here, because it's the first time Macbeth doesn't get what he wants. He wants Banquo and Pliance dead. The witches have said that they will take power off him ultimately, and Macbeth is not willing to let that happen. So he deploys at least 3, depending on different versions of Macbeth, murderers to go and commit this. This is a step removed. He's not doing it himself this time, but on the night of the murder, another murderer appears, and they say, "Who sent you?" And it's Macbeth. As he's paranoid. He wants to make doubly sure that this murder is going to go ahead, so he's sending 3 trained assassins to go and kill his best friend and his young son, and they ultimately fail. What fails Macbeth, perhaps more so than not doing it himself, is the night time. The night time that's been so good, so kind to him, the darkness that's allowed him to be so secretive and get away with things, fails him because the light is struck out. It says here, the murder, who did strike out the light? And when they've managed to light the torch again, they realise that Pliance has escaped. There's only one dead body on the floor, and this time the darkness has gone against the Macbeths. So there's perhaps a pivot point coming here with Pliance escaping. It's the start of the turnaround. It's the start of the good fighting back against the evil. A young child escapes. We know this child is key in making the prophecies come true from the witches, because he's going to take the power ultimately off Macbeth. He's going to become king in the future. Banquo's sons will become king, and nighttime has failed Macbeth here. So there is starting to be a change. Macbeth now is starting to unravel. You could make some lovely metaphors out of the blanket and the scarf and the material unraveling what's hidden their acts before. Is starting to unravel, and they're about to be exposed for what they are. Macbeth's murderous, power-hungry, power-crazed, psychotic characters, dysfunctional relationship that they have, and chaotic as well. All those words that you could use to describe them is about to be exposed. They can no longer hide. Darkness won't hide them, nor will any other synthetic material. And nighttime and darkness don't just start to turn against the Macbeths, they start to haunt them. And we see that in Act 5, Scene 1, Lady Macbeth's famous scene, the out damn spot. And the beginning of that scene, we see enter Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, with a taper. Now, a taper would have been the smallest candle, if you will, the smallest type of light that she could have got. She can't cope to be in darkness, even in sleep. She can't sleep, she's sleepwalking, she can't rest. Back to this idea of Macbeth at the beginning, Macbeth of murdered sleep. They're not going to be able to arrest her eternally damned. Lady Macbeth cannot deal with the consequences of the actions. She can't sleep anymore. All she can see is blood on her hands, the blood of King Duncan, the blood everywhere. It's haunting her at night time especially, so much so that she won't be in night time. She keeps this little light with her at all time, and it's only a little light, and that's quite symbolic, because there's only that tiny little bit of light left. There's almost like this big darkness is taking over, and there's this tiny little bit of light that Lady Macbeth keeps with her, that clings onto, but that is also being strangled away as well with her guilt as it consumes her, and that's about to disappear. She is going to descend into darkness. She is about to commit suicide again off stage within the play, and she's about to get her penance for her punishment. So the dark doesn't fail her like it failed Macbeth in the pursuit of Banquo and Fleance's death. What it's going to do is it's going to consume her, it's going to haunt her, it's creeping up, it's getting bigger and bigger and denser. This thick night that she pleaded for at the beginning of the play, by the end of the play, is something that is absolutely terrifying to her. She can't cope with, and she kind of wants away, and she keeps the light with her at all time. And the last one then, Act 5, Scene 4, some light imagery, is Macbeth's speech where he mulls over what life is. This is just after the death of his wife, Lady Macbeth, and he says, out, brief candle, and he talks about, I put light imagery because I said life imagery here, the candle becoming this metaphor for life. It's a fleeting experience, is life. We light, we're born, and if we're lucky, our candle will burn right down to the bottom and we'll live some nice long lives. Some people's candles get blown out and extinguished too soon, and it's kind of this fleetingness, this briefness, if you will, of life that he says signifies pretty much nothing. The last quotation there, it signifies nothing. Again, he's been plunged into some dark, deep thoughts here as to what the meaning of life is. Macbeth can't put his finger on it. Lady Macbeth has tapped out of it, if you will, and they've brought this on themselves. Some people we might, and some interpretations might be that we feel sympathy with Macbeth here, but we mustn't forget that they have brought this on themselves. This is Shakespeare again warning the audience: if you do these actions, you will suffer, and your candle might become briefer than you expected it to be. As always then, we have to ask ourselves why. That's the most important thing. So just as we were finishing off talking about the brief candle there, this is Shakespeare's warning. The darkness links to the supernatural, because Shakespeare wants to warn us that if you delve into the supernatural, then only dark things, only negative things, only evil things can happen to you and will consume you eventually. So don't forget to talk about why Shakespeare is using those things, what are his intentions. This moral warning that we keep going back to, very important. So have a look, there's some sentence stems for you here to help you write about the play. Shakespeare uses the contrast of night and day to expose the evil intentions of his characters. It's about getting this idea that there is an author in here, there is a manipulator that's controlling you to make you think, to give you warnings, whatever it might be. That's where those people that are going to get the higher marks at GCSE are going to excel. They're going to talk about the writer, the author, the manipulator, and this is what he's doing, and this is how he's doing it, and for the top marks, this is why he's doing it. And if you can get that what, how, why into your paragraphs, then your literature scores will improve. So have a look at the bottom one, go back, look at the other examples, they'll stand you in good stead. Good night.